Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to the Chessable Masters tournament in 2020. We're again in the quarterfinal stage. It's again Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana. Today we are having this second match game. In the first match game Magnus Carlsen took a clear win, and now in this second match game Fabiano Caruana only played a draw with the white pieces against Magnus Carlsen, so it was maybe now time for Magnus Carlsen to take the lead even in this second match game, because Fabiano is not playing well now against Magnus. Even the first game I think Magnus Carlsen could have won, but he played maybe some slightly inaccuracies, get only a draw, but he had a much better position through the whole game and really outplayed even Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces. So now in the second game Magnus opened now with the move d4. So Caruana responded with move knight to f6. We have c4, and after e6 the Nimzo Indian setup. After knight to f3 the counter Nimzo Indian setup, not allowing the spinning idea. If bishop to b4 happens, then we would have the opportunity to play knight to d2. We have c5 by Caruana, which is now sort of a Benoni style. If you play d5, then e takes d5. Leads now basically into Benoni. Magnus Carlsen finds a good way how to escape from the Benoni, because the Benoni can be tricky sometimes. Here Magnus played the natural move e3, and we have now d5, which is now a dynamic position in the center. One of the best way to proceed here is to get a clarification in the center. Here Magnus played c takes d5. After e takes d5 we have now bishop to b5. The idea behind this move is never allow this bishop to come to g4. If that happens, then black would really have a tension here around this knight on f3, and you see the knight on f3 is defending the d4 pawn, so there is this tension in the center. So bishop to b5. After bishop to d7 we have bishop takes d7, and now queen to d7. If you play knight to d7 it wouldn't be such a powerful idea. You see, the problem is now that you would have you would love to have your knight on this most active square on c6, so that's why queen to d7, and now Magnus played the move castling. And I was wondering now what could have happened if maybe here Caruana closes the center with the move c4, which would be maybe an idea if the position would be like this. This positional idea to maybe lock this dark bishop of white would be perfectly fine, but so far it's not possible, because white would have the opportunity to crack the position immediately. Here after c takes b3 we would simply play queen to b3, and we would have still possibilities to develop our dark square bishop. But even if you try something like b5 to support your c4 pawn in order maybe to recapture with the pawn and then create a 3 versus 1 situation, if you could just imagine after potential b takes c4 then d takes c4, black would have really a great game, because then black would have 3 pawns versus 1 pawn on the queen side and could create really some dynamics. But now a4 really is, I think, immediately losing here for black, because after something like b4, in order to keep your advantage on the queen side, we can simply take b takes c4. After d takes c4, knight to e5 is a possibility. After queen to c7, queen to f3, and it's game over. So you lose the rook, you cannot cover with the knight is protecting the c6. So so far, as I said, after the move bishop to d7 and queen to d7 castling, c4 isn't a possibility. It would be, I think, a bad game here for black. So that's why Caruana played the move knight to c6. We have b3. Now you see, when the knight is developed, the Magnus is not allowing the c4. This c4 could be really tricky, and here Caruana simply takes c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes, and queen takes d4. We have now a new position in which black has this obvious weakness. It's the weak pawn on d5. It's isolated pawn. So far Magnus Carlsen has provided really a long-term weakness for black. In the game bishop to d6 was played, and now bishop to b2 castling, and now knight to c3. The idea is, of course, to attack the pawn further, but there are some tactical threats with bishop takes h7 and then followed with queen takes d5 if you take it. But here Magnus played after Caruana's rook to e8. Magnus took the pawn anyway, knight to d5. Of course, you cannot take with the knight immediately. You get checkmated. On g7, so that's why Caruana played this tactic. Bishop takes h2. After king takes h2, this is really a forced tactical sequence. We have queen takes d5, and after queen takes d5, knight takes d5, and we have now a new position in which, okay, black has the knight, white has the bishop, but in this in these games in which you have both pawns on both sides, it's a favorable game for the bishop. It's really better here to have a bishop. The problem is that this pawn structure of white is perfectly fine. You cannot attack the pawns with your knight. So far we could of course use the open files now. That's why here rook to d1 played by Carlsen. We have rook to d8 and now rook to c1. So these are the open files. You want to occupy them of course with your rooks, but still white is slightly better here. Maybe black can hope for a draw if Caruana plays this endgame perfectly, but still you know how endgames are played against Magnus Carlsen. He is really the best endgame player. So here f6 played by Caruana, trying to lock the dark squares here, but this was really sort of an inaccuracy by Caruana. Maybe knight to b4 would be a better idea. After maybe something like a3, you see we would have the opportunity to maybe play knight to d3. White would be forced to release the pressure maybe here in the center with move rook to d8, and knight to b4, I think it's a much more active idea. Still, you would have possibilities to bring your knight on the c file and maybe lock the c file, go into a really fixed position and really try to get a draw here. Here the move f6 weakens the pawn structure further, because now Magnus saw his idea, rook to d4, with the idea to play rook to g4, then bishop to f6 would be sort of a tactical threat. In the game, a knight to e7 played by Caruana, and now rook to c7. Magnus simply was faster with his rooks. In the game, a knight to f5 was played, and now Magnus plays a very, very nice move, rook to g4. The idea is now this tactical threat immediately to play bishop takes f6. In the game, h5 played by Caruana, and now rook to g6. Great move here by Carlsen. In the game, rook to e8 played by Caruana, which was again a mistake. I think rook to c8, maybe black can hope for a draw. Okay, you will lose probably the pawn here on f6, but rook to c8, you have to get rid of at least one of these rooks, because these rooks are really too active here. But Caruana played the move rook to e8, hoping for some tactics, because Magnus simply took bishop takes f6. Great move by Magnus, but now Caruana finds a counter-attack with the move rook to e6. But here Magnus played a natural e4, attacking also the knight. In the game, rook takes e4. If you try rook takes f6, it's not a problem. We can simply play rook takes f6. After g takes f6, we would simply take the knight. This is a much better position here for white. We would play simply king to h3, king to h4, simply taking this knight. The problem for black is that white has occupied the 7th rank with the rook. Still, this pawn is a weakness, so we could take it immediately. The black would be only on the defensive side, would have to stay with his rook on the queen side in order to defend these 2 pawns. Now we could simply play much more active with the king, and when we get the king here on g6, it's game over. So after the move e4, rook takes e4 was played, but now Magnus plays a very nice move again, rook to g5. Even bishop takes g7 is a possibility, but here rook to g5 is much better, attacking the knight. We have rook to h4, we have king to g1, and now rook to e8 played by Caruana. And here Magnus misses immediately the win. Here Magnus had a great move, bishop to c3. The threat was of course by Caruana to play rook to e1 and creating a checkmate. Bishop to c3 is immediately losing here for Caruana, because now you have to do something in order to protect your knight. You have to play the move rook to f4, but now you get g3 and it would be game over. So you have to get with your rook somewhere. Rook to f3, king to g2 would be a possibility. You have to move the rook, you lose the knight. You see this rook is protecting the bishop on c3, so this bishop to c3 would be the immediate winning move, because it has a double function. It of course covers the e1 and but also continues the attack on the g7 square. So Magnus played the move g3, which was slightly worse, but still white is much better here. So it's not something that Magnus missed here, that Magnus still doesn't have a good position. After the move g3, we have rook to g4, forcing now the trades of rooks. After rook takes f5, we have g takes f6, and now the position is much more simplified, but now Magnus Carlsen took the correct pawn, I think. It's the pawn on b7. You don't want to take maybe here the pawn on f6, then black could defend maybe here the pawn on b7, but still, again, this is a better position for white, because white has always the opportunity to double up rooks on the 7th rank. It's a dangerous game here for black. So, but Magnus takes, I think, the correct pawn. Rook takes b7. Now you see black is continuing the game still with his 2 weak pawns, so we want to take the pawn that could be defended. That's why here Magnus has a completely winning endgame. Here after the move h4, Magnus plays rook to f4, rook takes f4, g takes f4, and now rook to a8 by Caruana, but now Magnus played king to g2. We can simply play again actively with our king. It's a similar position like this one that I've already explained. Again, white is cutting off this king's ability to play king. The king is stuck here on the 8th rank. This rook is stuck to the defense of this a pawn. Now the king can march, and so we can simply take this weakness on h4. So in the game, Caruana tried a5, king to h3. We have a4, and now king takes h4. We have a takes b3, a takes b3, and now Caruana tried to get this rook some kind of active here, but now king to g4. We have rook to d5, and now b4, simply pushing this pawn. We have king to f8. We have b5, king to e8. Now f5. We have king to f8 and b6. Rook to b5, you want to bring your rook, of course, behind the pawn, but now f3, king to e8, f4, we have king to f8, and now very nice move here by Carlsen, king to h5. The problem is now for Caruana, you have to take this pawn here, because the king comes very active into the game. We have rook to g6, and here after rook to f4, rook to c7 played by Carlsen, and in this position Caruana resigned, because there's nothing you can do. b7 is the threat forward with rook to c8, and it's game over. So congratulations to Magnus, great win with this idea to create this isolated pawn. Immediately get really a nice attacking formation, get a huge activity with his rooks. I'm not sure what's going on with Caruana, but you see Magnus is playing really this natural moves. I think this games that Magnus is playing is very understandable for all of us, with great ideas to play on simple threats like weak pawns, weak squares. That's why he is the world champion, and his endgame technique is, of course, brilliant. Again, I don't see a good way how Caruana can get out of this mess. I think this match game will be over after this day today. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games from the series. Here is the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thanks you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.